Good catch. I didn't get too far. I should have known on a morning like this that the brain wouldn't be 100%. So it's probably a 95% because I caught it pretty quick. Anyhow, we have a few examples to go over AJAX today. I will go over them at least in part. If I do not cover them, or if I do not cover them completely, you can review them on Canvas. They're in the rest of the semester folder. And that's about it, I guess. Ask any questions that you have. So the first thing we're going to look at is the jQuery way of doing AJAX. So we've looked at the plain JavaScript way of doing it. We're going to look at the jQuery, and we've already looked at using the fetch, which is a slightly different way to do it in JavaScript. So let's go and let's put our files where they belong for this web server. Let's get rid of all these. Paste these in. All right. And to refresh our memory, they're the same calculation that we did before. I do this every week. All right, that's a quiz. We'll get to that later on. It's not the one I wanted to copy. We went over the plain JavaScript version of this one. Now we're going to go over the using jQuery. From my perspective, it doesn't matter which of these you use on your assignment. So AJAX jQuery works the same. We put in the age, beats per 10 seconds or 6 seconds, calculate, and you get the answer displayed on the page. And again, it is, there's no flicker. If you look at the status bar, it's not reloading the page. It is updating the page. So remember the cycle in AJAX where the initial request for a page is made. The HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are downloaded to the client. And the JavaScript includes the Java to make AJAX requests to the server. AJAX requests to the server are made in several parts. First part is that the JavaScript code will, based on some event, in this case, the clicking of the button, will make a request to a server and probably pass data on the query string or part of the form. We've been using the query string because I think it's a little easier to see. All right, we make that request. The server does its thing and sends back data. The client side JavaScript is informed of this, that the server has processed it, and will take the data back from the server and format it and redisplay it on the page. So let's look at the code here. Calculator AJAX jQuery. All right. All this is the same. We have our validate form. I've associated with that button. All right. First of all, I only do this when the page is finished loading. That's what document ready means. I create a function to execute when the page is finished loading. This is what you could call an anonymous function. The function doesn't have a name. It's just associated with the onloaded event. When the page is loaded, and I have to wait till the page is loaded, because if I try to do this right off, the button might not be on the page yet. The button might not have displayed yet. So when the page is loaded, I'm going to create for the click event of the button, calculate button. Notice there's no on click, but we attach the function via this method by giving that button a click function, another anonymous function. We first validate the form. If it's true, we create our URL. We format the URL to contain the value of the age and the value of the number of beats in 6 seconds. We then make an AJAX request. On success, we call this function, which simply takes the result of the AJAX request and displays it on the page. If there's validation errors, it displays them in this error span. Now, the interesting thing is you know, you should be able to sort of take the AJAX one and see how it corresponds to the pure JavaScript one. The thing here is AJAX handles a lot of the details for you. You don't have to actually create the XML HTTP object. That is created for you when you execute the statement. This is a better way of doing JavaScript than using the onClick method. I think we alluded to this before, because in this case, the JavaScript is completely independent of the HTML. It's achieving that separation that we want. Just like we have separation between CSS and HTML, it's best to have separation between JavaScript and HTML. All right, let's go and let's look at this next example. And this next example is a quiz. And if you think about it, a quiz we would not want to grade client side, right? Because a savvy user would view the HTML and see the answers more than likely if it was all done via JavaScript. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to grade it via AJAX. So let's copy those files over. This does some cool PHP stuff in addition to doing the AJAX. Let's see how it behaves first, and then we will dive in, take a deeper dive into it. We have a quiz that we can enter answers. So let's get some of them right, some of them wrong. So I got the second one wrong. The other 3 I think I got right. I click grade. I get a 75%. All right. Now notice this doesn't say anything about which questions are right or wrong. That is by design. We'll look at how we could possibly do that in a minute here. Because we could flag the questions we got right and wrong and display them. So let's look at this code. First of all, PHP is used to generate the quiz. There's an include file that includes the questions of the quiz. And again, that should be PHP. We've talked about include files before. Oh, I didn't want to do that. Thought that said Visual Studio Code. Well, half hour later or so. This is two arrays that has the first add-end, and the second add-end. So in other words, the first pair of these numbers in these arrays are a 1 and a 5. So the first question becomes 1 plus 5. 8 plus 4, 9 plus 9, 5 plus 7. Nice thing is we can add as many questions as we want, provided they're all addition. Again, we could make it a little more complicated by adding an operation in there, plus, minus, subtract, whatever, plus, minus, multiply, divide. But we just kept it simple with addition. So rather than having our HTML form hard-coded, which means that if you had to add a question, that would require editing the HTML and manually putting in the form tag, we have this code. In this one, I put the display form right in this because, again, this is specific to this form. I set a global variable in PHP. Global will make it available throughout the script. And I loop through these arrays and I print from the first array element, the second array's first element. So I loop through these for as many elements as there are in that array. And then I put up on there an input box whose name is answer the subscript of the array. So if I view source here, which if you're struggling with PHP, sometimes it's good to view the source that it creates. First question is answer 0. Second question is answer 1. Third question is answer 2. That'll make it very easy for us to loop through and get the answers to the questions. All right, so that's how we use PHP to create the form. We have our standard AJAX thing. We have a grade quiz method. We have created our XML HTTP object. We call RO for request object, or we call it HTTP. That probably should be XML HTTP. So that's the pipeline we've created. When we grade quiz, we form our URL as being grade PHP, and we add to the end a list of the answers by pulling out answer sub 0, answer sub 1, answer sub 2, and so on. We get this count of how many elements there are in the array, so we know how many times to execute this loop. And if it's not the last time here, we add an ampersand for this. So what we're going to get if we execute this is grade.php answer 0 equals whatever the user's answer is. an ampersand. Answer 1 equals, and so on down the line. There'll be ampersands after every answer except the last answer. So in our case, it'll look like this. I'm just typing in 12 as the answer because it's easy to type. And there won't be an ampersand after that because there's no more data after that. So that's what this does. If it's the last time through the loop, if it's not the last time through the loop, then add an ampersand. Otherwise, if it is the last time through the loop, skip the ampersand. So that's what our URL is going to look like. If you don't believe me, I'm alerting the URL. The other thing you can do is write it to the console log. I open that pipeline. I set the ready state change function. That is, again, the function that gets called when the server has finished processing my request. And then I actually go ahead and make the request. The server does its thing. The server includes the questions as well, right? Why do we do this? Well, we will make sure we have the same questions that we're grading in the questions that were created. We find out how many questions there are. We loop through. We get each answer in turn. We get the correct answer by calculating it. You might have been wondering why I did not have a third array with the answers to the question. The reason is because these are all addition. I can compute the answer. Why should I put an array of the answers and accidentally maybe get one of them wrong? So instead, I'm going to actually compute the answer. Then I look to see if the user answer that I pull from the query string is equal to the answer from the answer to the correct answer. If the user's answer is equal to the correct answer. If it is, I output a Y, otherwise I output an N. I put a comma between them. So again, let's go through and let's put in code so that we can follow what's going on here. I'm going to alert the URL to make sure the URL is correct. This is usually the steps I would take if I was troubleshooting. That is the URL that gets called. Is that correctly formatted? Yes, it is. It corresponds to what I have in this Word document. With the addition, with the only difference being the exact value of the answers, which I pulled from the form. All right. So I know that that is correct because that's what the client, or I'm sorry, that's what the server is expecting. How can we verify the server is doing its job? We can paste this URL. And we should get what? We should get an N, Y, Y, Y. Because this one's wrong. This one's correct. This one's correct. This one's correct. So when I go to that URL, I get N, Y, Y, Y. So I can test that component by itself. That's one of the tricky things about AJAX. AJAX could go wrong in several different places. Number one, I could not make the request correctly, all right? And therefore I get bad results. Number two, I might have made the request correctly, but the server isn't processing it the way that I expect it. Number three, I did the first two steps right, but I'm not formatting the output correctly when I display it. The first and third are the responsibility of JavaScript. The second is responsible with server-side code. All right. This allows us to test one thing at a time. I tested the URL and I looked at it and I saw, yeah, that's what it's supposed to be. That's what the server's expecting. I tested the server part on its own. So now I'm pretty sure that we've made it to this point correctly. And what can I do to verify that? I can put an alert in here to display, hey, make sure I'm getting back what I think I'm getting back. So I type in 5, 12, 18, 12. There's my alert. That's formatted right. I click OK. I get back from the server NYYY. So if it's not formatted correctly, I'm getting back the right stuff from the server, then this code is correct. Now, here's what I do. I get back what's called a comma delimited file. Now, delimited files are one of the ways to send back more than one piece of data. In the heart rate example, I only sent back one piece of data, whether they were in the heart range or not, or whether they were above in the range or below. In this case, I'm sending back multiple things. I'm sending back for each question a Y or an N. Think about it for a second. Why am I sending back Y's and N's? Why am I not just sending back the percentage that the student got on the quiz? Well, I'm not doing that because I want flexibility in how I'm going to handle it. In this case, I'm displaying the percentage. I actually could, if I wanted to, when I'm looping through, go and set right or wrong in this, I guess in this span or some other span that I create. If I have the full data, I can choose to present it several different ways. If I just gave it a percentage, that's all I could do. I couldn't break it down and show per assignment what they, or per question what they got. So I'm looping through that, and if the question is, if the value is Y, then it's correct. I add the correct. Otherwise, I increment how many questions there are. So this counts how many questions I have. This counts how many Y's I have. Split breaks down things, it breaks down a string from a long string separated by commas into an array of strings. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm looping through that array. All right. I know this is quick. If you have questions, feel free to ask them now or after class or anytime that you wish. Last thing we have is a little dictionary. This one we even have 3 versions of. We have a delimited version, a JSON version, and a XML version. The difference between these 3 versions is the format from which the data from the server comes back to the client. So let me copy all these over. And let me call the delimited version first. That's the one we're going to spend the most amount of time on. First of all, let's get a sense of how this behaves. And we'll see there's actually two AJAX requests made here. Okay, or not. Delimited dictionary.php. Oh, that's dictionary.html. Interesting. All right. This is a little application to translate mathematical terms from English to Spanish. So if I type in a letter of the alphabet, I get a list of all the mathematical terms in my little database that start with the letter B. As I continue to type, it narrows it down. That's similar to what we have in Google, where they do where as you're typing in your search term, it shows you the most popular searches with that term. I can pick one, click go, and it shows me the Spanish translation of it. All right. So there's actually two AJAX requests here. One, when the user, and the event that kicks that off is the user typing in a character or more than one character. The second AJAX request is when the user clicks the button. Well, let's look at both the client and the server for this. Now, the first part of this is the same across every method. The way that the user, the client makes a request to the server is the same, regardless if it's delimited, JSON, or XML. So we're actually creating two request objects here because we have two AJAX requests. Same code as we had before. We have this function called getWords. All right. And it gets passed an argument. On key up, getWords equals this value. So this is the text box for name. This text box right here. And I wish I had like two cameras so I could show you my hand as I'm typing this in and show you the screen. I press the key down. Whoops. I press the key and on key up. Interesting. I was holding the key down, but yeah, I'm a little confused about why that happened that way, but oh well, never mind. I'm glad I don't have two cameras. When I press a key, that function gets called and it passes the value in the text box. So if I typed in an F, it passes an F. If I typed in FI, it passes FI. So the getWords I accidentally delete something. Where'd my getWords function go? I think I did. There we go. This gets the value of the text box. We make sure that there's something in there. All right. And we make sure that it's not all spaces. I believe that's what this does. I should be using a trim there, but we'll let that go. I create a variable for my drop down, and I set that drop down length to 0. So every time I type something in here, this happens so quick that you can't see it, but it first clears out the drop down, then it redisplays it. Oh, my mistake. If I have nothing in there, if I like go from here to here, it clears it out. If there's nothing in there, it blanks it out. So if I like right now, I put a K in here. If I backspace, it will clean it out because there's nothing in there. This is looking to see, by the way, if the initial letter is a space. We don't want the initial letter to be a space. All right. Otherwise, that's assuming that we've typed something in here. I'm going to do this request. And my request is going to be to dictionary1.php word equals, and it's equal to the string that I've entered. On ready state, call create DD. Send that request. So let's look at what the data coming back from this looks like. So let's say I type in an A. I get back here a delimited data where I get back for each word a pair of data items. I get back a subscript, that's its position in the array, and I get back the mathematical term. So that's what the data looks like that I get back. Let's look at that code, and maybe that will make a little more sense. I have an include that has 2 arrays. This is called parallel arrays, by the way, because they have the same number of entries in them, and their entries correspond. So the first element in the English array corresponds to the first element in the Spanish array. Absolute value corresponds to that. Now I have to make sure that there's the same number of elements in it, which I have. And each one has a subscript. That's what this value is. So I get back the thing with an A, words that start with an A, and their subscript, their position in the array. Now, a more robust application would actually pull this data from a database and do a query. Now, I loop through all the words in English, and I look to see this looks to see if the position of the word in the English word is equal to 0. 3 equals is similar to 2 equals. 3 equals also checks the type of the data. So make sure that it's numeric. All right, which we really probably don't need here, but I did it. And if it matches, if the word that I've typed in matches the first part of the English word, in other words, it finds that string at position 0 in the English word, then I have a winner. And I output the name and index here. And I know I don't have none if there's a match. If I get all the way through the loop and there's none, I print that no words match this pattern and give a subscript of -1 to that. So the ball is back in the client side's court. Probably should be checking to see if Oh, I do. Check to see if the ready state is 4. I get back the text from the server. I create a option variable. I get a pointer to the dropdown. I clear out the dropdown. I split everything by colon. So that will create an array where each element is the word, a semicolon, and the index in the array. I then split that element by using the semicolon. So that will split it into a 2-element array. The first element being the name, the second element being the index. And I create an option for the dropdown that I add that consists of the name and the index. What happens when we select it then? That happens when we click the button. I make a request. I give it the index of it. I call a different server-side script that is simply going to return the element in the Spanish array that corresponds to the index we passed. So absolute value is 0. If I selected that, it would say dictionary2.php index equals 0 or 1 or 2. And it simply grabs from the array and outputs it. And the dictionary.html, when it gets the result, it simply displays that in the inner HTML. All right, let's quickly look at the JSON and XML version of these. A lot of it's going to be the same as far as making the request. But what we're going to get back from the server and how the client formats what we get back from the server is going to be different. The same thing here. Type in an A. It makes that request that goes to the server. Now, what does the request look like? What does the response coming back? I won't review how that request is made because that request is made the same way. But what do we get back from the server now? We get back this. JSON, and you should be familiar with JSON from what we did earlier with the weather application. Same sort of thing, we get back a word list that contains word elements that contain the word itself and the index. This part is the same as I mentioned. Get words is the same, create the DD is different. We use the technique to parse the JSON data, similar to what we did in the weather example. The XML is going to be a little bit different still. Again, the parts that are same, the way we make the request to the server is the same. why I made that yellow. But how the data gets back to the client is different. It's going to be an XML format. This last request, by the way, is the same in each case. So let's look at what the data looks like coming back from the server in the case of XML. It looks like an XML document. With XML, it's similar to HTML, but you can sort of create your own tags for your own purposes. So here, my root tag is a word list. It contains a series of items. Each item has a word tag and an index tag. What does the server look like that creates this? Server-side code that creates this? Essentially looks the same as before. I forgot to show you the JSON one, but it looks the same as before, except it adds extra formatting in. Here's the JSON that adds extra formatting in, and here's XML that adds extra formatting in, adds the tags in. Now, one difference. In the case of the XML, we're actually returning XML. We're not returning just a string of data. And therefore, the code that processes it has to look for the data in a different place. Instead of response text, it looks for the data in response XML. We can then parse that XML and get the elements using the tag. And pull the data from there. I realize the last couple of these were very quick. Take the time to study them and ask questions if you have them. Now, I posted to Canvas some important end of semester information, and I hate to read to people, but I will do that in this case. Let's see. Final will be available next Wednesday through the 13th. 2 hours, open book and notes. Everything that you turn in must be due the end of day 12/13. Nothing will be accepted after that time unless we have agreed to it in advance. If you come into me after that deadline and you had a good reason, I might give you an incomplete, but I'm not going to grade anything that's turned in after 12/13 until after the semester. I just, for my own sanity of getting my grades done, I have to be kind of hard line on that. So if you request extra time and I allow it, you'll be given an incomplete. All right, and consult College Catalog for information about incompletes. Our request for incomplete must be made by end of day 12/13. There's no lecture the week of 12/4. So next Tuesday, there is no lecture. I will, however, extend my office hours. I don't have any lectures in any of my classes next week, so it's all office hours. So I will be there 9 to 11 on Monday and 1 to 3, 9 to 11 on Tuesday and 1 to 3. Other office hours are by appointment. The week of 12/11, office hours are by appointment only. And there's no lecture that week either. Please double check your grades in Canvas to make sure I haven't made a mistake, because I have been known to make them on occasion. Are there any questions? All right, That's all I had. We'll see you in lab sometimes. Take care.